And in the last challenge, we'll have Sarah talk about of the circular economy and opportunities for recycling. Take it away, Sarah.
Great, thank you. Emily, are you advancing slides or am I? Oh, wow, look at that. So slick. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Sarah Morley, and I'm the Strategic Engagement Manager for Circular Economies at WRAP. And today we're going to talk about how to innovate for the circular economy. We can go on to the next one. Um, And just a little bit about me. Aside from my work at WRAP, I'm also the author of We See Wednesdays, which is a weekly zero waste newsletter, although recently it's been every other week. I have a few certifications in zero waste planning for businesses and communities, and I got a couple of master's degrees at Johns Hopkins University, where I studied public and private opportunities to lowering greenhouse gas emissions through our waste system. And all of that is to say that I love talking about trash. We can go to the next slide. And so today we're going to quickly cover the difference between the linear and circular economies, and then talk about societal changes and business opportunities related to food and textile waste. So the economy that we're in right now is mostly linear. You take resources from the earth, you make a product, you sell it, and the consumer uses it, and then they toss it in the trash when they're done. And according to the National Renewable Energy Lab, the amount of plastic that we landfill every year is worth $7.2 billion if we were to keep it in circulation. And for those of you who care about reducing greenhouse gas emissions, which I think this audience does, 45% of global GHGs come from resource extraction and consumption alone. So the linear economy generates nearly half of our greenhouse gases, and then it dumps money in the trash. So moving forward to the next slide, um, that is why today we're talking about the circular economy. There's billions of dollars worth of commodities that go into the trash that could be kept in circulation. So here we have an image that I grabbed from Vespa, and it gives you an idea of what this looks like. Because oftentimes you hear like circular economy, you think like, okay, but like, what does that mean? So you see at the start, raw material is inputted into the system. It's inputted into the circle. Um, and so it's extracted once. And now this is important. In the design phase, products are designed for the circular economy. So they're designed for easy repair, reuse, and then also simple recycling. So that means like it doesn't mean to just like create a film plastic that claims to be recyclable. It actually needs to be recyclable for the majority of consumers, right? Like we all know film plastic, you can't put it in your curbside recycling bin. Um, so if you look at the circular economy, it's really just about keeping things in the economy so it doesn't end up in the trash. It keeps things in circulation. So we can go to the next slide. Um, and before we get into the challenges, I do want to touch on the zero waste hierarchy because this does inform um, how to work within the circular economy. So often the first thing that comes to mind with circularity is to innovate only for recycling. And I totally get that because this helps us move from a resource extractive process to a circular method. Um, but recycling is near the bottom of the triangle because it's the last effort to recapture materials. You're relying on a number of factors that need to go right in order for it to work. You need the product to end up in a city that has a strong recycling infrastructure. You need population density to ensure a strong and consistent feedstock. You need public education around the activity. And you need a regional market that's actually going to buy the secondhand commodities. And then you're also relying on the customer's altruism to put the product in the right bin, whether that's a household consumer or if it's a business consumer. And then there's the destructive process of recycling, which requires some resources like energy and water, which again, like that's better than extracting virgin materials, but you do have to keep in mind that it does use resources. So that's why you see recycling as tier 4 in the zero waste hierarchy. So at the top, like we mentioned in the previous slide, is redesign. And then the next tier is reduce and then reuse. And so this means reducing the volume of product that you're producing. So instead of selling rice in a plastic bag, you can sell a reusable container once, and then sell rice in bulk that go into reusable packaging. And of course, that package can be designed to be recycled eventually, but the idea is to not create like a one and done product, right? So it can be kept in circulation for longer. So maybe it's a glass container or something that can be used until it basically falls apart. Um, Next slide, please. Okay, so now their brain is surging with excitement about innovating for the circular economy. Let's talk about some opportunities in food and textile waste. So, starting with food, organic waste that ends up in a landfill produces methane. And consequently, landfills are the second largest producer of methane in the US, which means if you were to divert 75% of organic waste from landfills, that's the equivalent of removing 50 million cars from the road. So if you're someone who's like, man, I really can't buy an electric vehicle right now, like an alternative is you could just eat your leftovers in the refrigerator. Um, or have like, smarter shopping habits at the grocery store. So food waste creates methane. Um, it's also just like a wasted meal. So um, according to Feeding America, we could have fed families 145 billion meals with our wasted food. And 35% of our wasted food happens at the household level. So that just means like people purchase too much, it ends up in the refrigerator, they forget about it, it gets moldy, and they toss it. Um, it's a number of factors. So it creates methane. We've got a lot of wasted meals, and then it's also a waste of resources. So when you think about like resource extraction, um, agriculture is a hugely resource extractive process. So if you think about it, 22% of America's fresh water is actually used on food that's never eaten or goes to use. So this is food that just ends up in a landfill. 16% of our cropland is actually used for crops that go to waste. And then 6% of our greenhouse gas emissions come from the production and transportation of food that just goes to waste. Next slide, please. The good news is there's tons of opportunity. Um, 31% of food that's produced in the US is surplus. So that means that's unsold or uneaten. And a tiny, tiny fraction of that is composted or recovered to feed people in need. So that means that there's a lot of money in the value of like the food that's just surplus, right? So it's worth $382 billion a year. That's just money that's ending up in the trash every year that you can find, you can innovate a solution for this food. Um, that's 237 million tons of food, and over 40% of it is fresh fruits and vegetables. So it's a lot of perishable items, and 20% of that food is prepared foods. So when you're thinking about this for the competition, you can think about innovations for like how to maybe keep it from decomposing faster, or maybe ways that you can, prepare the food differently so that it doesn't go to waste, or ways that you can feed families, or divert it from the landfill. There's just like so much food, there's so much opportunity, and the majority of this food is edible. And if it's not edible for human consumption, maybe it's edible for agricultural uses, for like chickens or cattle. Not to give you too many ideas, but there's so much opportunity. So for more data on this, I recommend going to refed.org. They have a lot of data that's really useful. So we're going to go to the next slide, and we're going to talk about textiles. So this is the next opportunity for innovation and waste. The fashion industry used to have 4 seasons a year. So it was, spring, summer, fall, the typical seasons. But now they have 50 seasons a year. So it's a system designed to churn out new trends so that customers feel like they're always out of style. But it's created this way so that manufacturers or fashion producers can sell more products, right? And they're able to do this because they create clothes that are made of cheap materials, and they're also not built for durability. So they save a lot of money And they're also sold at really low prices. So it makes this clothing really accessible to the consumer. The problem with that is that people are buying clothes at a faster rate, and then they're also discarding them at a faster rate. So there's a higher rate of clothing being produced, sold, and purchased, and then landfilled within a 12-month cycle. So consequently, we have 17 million tons of textile waste that ends up in landfills every year. Um, and that's just in the United States. And only 15% of our textile waste, so this is post-consumer textile waste, is actually recirculated through donation sites or downcycled into commercial rags. There's another problem with clothing, and that is bracketing. So consumers are using their homes as fitting rooms, which means they're buying two sizes of every style online, and then they try it on at home, they figure out what they like, and then they ship back whatever doesn't work out for them. And so the problem with that is stores are producing twice as many garments because they don't know how much they're actually going to sell, and they have to like overproduce. Um, and then they get all these returned items, but because their trends move so quickly, by the time their clothes get returned to them, they're out of style or it's not cost effective to actually re-inventory them and try and resell them. On top of that, 16 million tons of carbon dioxide is emitted from return transportation alone. And 5 billion pounds of clothes are returned annually, just to put that into perspective. So just thinking about this competition, like maybe you can come up with an idea for like how to help consumers be smarter about their purchasing decisions online so that they're not purchasing clothes just kind of haphazardly with the assumption that they can just return whatever they want. And then on top of that, clothing, like the production of clothing is a huge waste of resources. So it uses 342 million barrels of oil to make synthetic fibers every year. And then the fashion industry also uses 20 trillion liters of water every year. So they're the second largest consumer and polluter of water in the world. We're going to go to the next slide. And then just to wrap this up, some opportunities in textile waste. With the tariffs on China, and a lot of our clothes are produced in China, tariffs on China don't impact our secondhand market. So there is a lot of opportunity for innovation with upcycling opportunities. And there is an abundance of unused goods with tags from people returning items that go unsold. And there may be a resurgence of a market for clothing and shoe repair. And then there's also opportunity to develop technology or systems to improve clothing fits and then reduce returns. And that's all I have. But thank you for your time.